In this video, we're going to take a look at the workflow in DesignerLogic that shows how to create a proposal with multiple items on it and ask for a 50% deposit. And then, as the items ship or are delivered, invoice the client for the remaining 50% of the items. You might have multiple invoices for the client as the items become available. So we are on a test project here called Aaron Midtown House. And you can see there are no transactions right now, no proposals, invoices, retainers, or purchase orders. However, if we go to the items page for this project, we have the full items list right here of all the items on the project. Now you might not have all these ready at one time. I just have this populated for the purpose of this video. So what we want to do is first create the proposal with all the items on it. So to do that, the easiest way to do that is choose one of the items and click on New Proposal. And that's going to open up the transaction form for the proposal, and we want to put in a title. And you can put in the anything you want for the title just to let the client know kind of what the proposal is about overall. Now if the address from the project doesn't show up, click on the address box and it will usually paste that right in coming from your project information. And we want to make sure all this other information is filled out correctly. Now the calculate by percent, we want to choose that if we're going to ask for a 50% deposit, and we want to use the total proposal. And in this case, we're going to include the tax in the calculation for that 50% because we want to get 50% of the entire proposal, including tax. And then the multiplier, we want to put in 0.5 for the 50%. Now, the note on printout, if you want to put something to clarify this for your client, it's very easy. Just type in a quick note. And here we have, as items are shipped, the remaining 50% will be due. It's a pretty clear note, so your client can understand that they'll be invoiced as the items become available. Once you have all this set up, just click on Submit, and that will create the proposal. And now you can see that we have a proposal with just this one item on it that comes from our project items list. Now to put the other items on it, we want to just come up to Edit Add, click on Add New Item. And we want to add existing items from the project. Now you can create a new item from scratch or copy it from your history or your catalog, but in this case we're going to add an existing item from the project. And here you can see all the items on that project that are not yet on a proposal, and we're just going to select all and click this Add Selected Items to Proposal. And now we can see we have this proposal with many items on it, each with their own price, and we have a total up here, and we have a deposit requested as well that is 50% of the total. Now when we go to one of the print options, there's a whole bunch of ways you can print a proposal, and you can choose your own columns that you want to show the client, or you can just choose one of these standard proposal printouts, which is what we're going to use right here to show this video. So hit Standard Proposal. And you can see now we have this proposal ready for printing, and at the bottom we have the deposit requested, which is 50%, and when you go up to File Print, you can see that it's formatted to print on a normal piece of paper or create a PDF for it. Now, one thing also you might want to take a look at when you create your proposal like this is the proposal workflow, and right now that status is still working on, but if we want to edit that proposal, we can change the status right here from still working on to maybe sent to client pending. You can create your own workflow right here for your proposals so you can keep track of exactly what stage they're in. Now if you want to create different status workflows that come than what comes by default in DesignerLogic, click on this little pencil icon and you can see this is your proposal workflow right here. Now you can adjust this, you can delete ones or add new ones in or anything like that. This is actually a way to really keep clear with your staff on exactly what's going on with the proposal. So once we change that, we can just hit Save and Close. And now you can see this proposal is sent to the client and it's pending. Now, so what we have is a proposal for a lot of items asking for a 50% deposit. If we come back to the project dashboard, here you can see we have this proposal and the totals right here. Now this is for all the proposals. If you click on the proposal link right here, you'll see that proposal listed out that we just created. And if you click on the proposal number anywhere in DesignerLogic, these little light blue fonts are clickable. So click on number 1, it's the first proposal for this project. It will open up that proposal. Okay, so what we want to do now is log in the payment when the client pays this deposit. So we have a deposit requested for $21,000 and change. And let's say the client sends you a check for $22,144.75. So you want to log this in as a retainer in DesignerLogic for this project. So we come up to right here at the top, the Edit Add button, and we come down to retainer or deposit because we're going to add a new retainer or deposit. And it's for this project, and we received it on this day, and we can say it's check 44, or it could be a credit card payment. You just want to log in what it is, and you can log it in as depositing to an account like Wells Fargo or something like that if you want to keep track of that in DL. Then we want to put the amount in. So they're going to pay the full amount of a deposit today, and so we put in $22,144.75, and you can put in a memo. And once you have that information here, just hit save and close. And now you'll see that this deposit has been logged in to your project over here, and it has an amount used and amount left. And I'll show you some of that more detail in just a second. Now, if we refresh this page for the dashboard, you can see down here that we have a retainer amount as well showing up on your totals on the left. And if you click on the retainers link, you can see that as well. Okay, and one thing you want to keep in mind is after you've logged in this retainer in DesignerLogic is to also log in that deposit taken from the client or retainer into QuickBooks against the client's account. So you want to make sure that you have it in DesignerLogic as a retainer, and just log it into QuickBooks also as a deposit or retainer. Now this is obviously very fast. It is double entry, but it takes literally 5 seconds because all you have to do in DL is come up and click on the retainer deposit form, fill out this little form, and do basically the same thing in QuickBooks at the same time. That way you have the payment the client made in both DesignerLogic and QuickBooks. And here we are with a proposal, a 50% retainer taken, and now let's say that some of the items are shipping and we want to bill the client for the remaining 50% of those items. So to take a closer look at that, we'll go back to the items page for that project. And let's just say a number of these items in the attic here are shipping quickly, and we want to invoice, say, just the top 5 of these items or so to a client. So what we want to do is put the items that are shipping on their own invoice. So we go to the first item we want to do, and we come over to the 3-dot menu and click New Invoice right here. And this is just like the new proposal form, but it's an invoice form. So we'll just type in a title for this invoice. And you want to make sure the address shows up, so just click this button if it doesn't, because right here is what shows up at the header of the invoice. We want to come down and make sure the rest of this information is correct. And we also have a status workflow, just like we did on the proposal. We're just going to leave it as still working on right now. And we can also put a note to the client on the invoice. And that lets the client know exactly what you're charging and why. And we click Submit. Now we have a new invoice with just this one item on it, but we want to put those other items on it as well. So we come up to Edit Add, click New Item, and we're going to choose Add an existing item from the project because we've already got those items in there. And now we just want to select the items that we want to also put on that invoice. So we're going to select these 4 additional items and click the Add Selected Items to Invoice. And here we have the invoice with all 5 items on it, and we have a total as well. So now the client has already paid 50% from that proposal, so we don't want to have the entire amount due on the invoice because they've already paid a good amount. So what we want to do is use some of that retainer to pay half of this invoice. So if we go to the payment section, and here we can click on Use Retainer. So we're going to use a retainer to pay some of this invoice. and we can click on the retainer that we logged in. And that's just telling us this is the total amount that the retainer has and how much is left, and all of it's left right now. And it fills out this information down here. Now what we want to do is put in the amount that we're going to log in. So in this case, we're going to do 50% of this invoice. So the invoice is 61.96.19. And so we're going to multiply it times 50%. And we get 3098.01 or 0.1. So we want to put in 3098 and 10 cents. And we can type in a note if we want to. So we hit submit. And now you can see that we have that payment logged in against this invoice. So if we close that and then we refresh this page, we have the total here for this invoice. And if we click on print options, and we'll choose standard invoice printout, but there's a bunch of different options. You can see right here that we have the total amount due right here, or the total invoice, and then the amount paid and the amount due. And there's 1 cent difference in this particular instance. So that's how you do that. And if we go to the file print section, you can see we have a nice clean invoice. So that's not finished yet with this workflow, because we want to make sure this goes into QuickBooks. So what we do is if we close this invoice and actually we refresh the items page in DesignerLogic, you can see here we have this new invoice number for these 5 items that are all on this proposal right here. And if you scroll down, you can see that these other items are not yet on an invoice because they haven't shipped yet, and we don't need to ask the client for anything yet. So we just have this one invoice. Now what you want to do, because we're using QuickBooks with this, is you want to export that invoice to QuickBooks so you can also log the payment in there. So we go to invoices. And here we have a list of all our invoices for every project, and we're going to download for QuickBooks. So we click that link. And again, if you click on the How To button up here, you'll see different videos for how to import into QuickBooks. But we want to filter by the project in this case to get just the invoice or invoices that we want to export, and hit filter. And here we have those items from that invoice. We click download, and that is going to create that spreadsheet that you can then import into QuickBooks, and it will create an invoice in QuickBooks for that client. Now once you download that, it's a good idea to select them all and then just mark them all as having been exported so that you have track of that as being exported. Okay, and so in this video, we're assuming you exported this invoice into QuickBooks and it created the invoice in QuickBooks. So at this point in QuickBooks, what you want to do is just use the retainer that you logged into QuickBooks before to pay 50% of that invoice like you just did in DesignerLogic. And that way, both invoices in DesignerLogic and QuickBooks will show 50% has been paid and 50% is still due. And then when you send the client the invoice from DesignerLogic or from QuickBooks if you want to, it'll show that there's just a 50% amount due, and then that will be the final payment on the invoice. So to log that in, like let's say the client pays the 50%, it's like a week or two go by, and the client pays the 50% on that invoice. There's a few ways to do that. There's one really quick way in Shortcuts. You can come in and you can really quickly enter a payment on an invoice by selecting the project and the invoice. In this case, it's Midtown, and then this invoice. And it'll show you how much is due, and we're going to use a new payment, not the retainer for it. And you could just say they paid CC or something like that, and you can just put in the amount that they paid and hit submit, and that will log that payment into the invoice. In this case, we'll hit submit, go to invoice. And here you can see now the amount due on that invoice is 0. All these items have been paid for. If we click on payments, you'll see that there is right now two payments on it, one from the retainer and one from this credit card payment, and the invoice is paid in full. So at that time, you want to, the time that you use the shortcuts to enter the payment in DesignerLogic, you want to just very quickly enter the same payment that the client made in QuickBooks, which is just about as quick and easy, and that way the invoice in QuickBooks is paid off as well. So now you have on that project, if we use shortcuts to go back to that project dashboard, now you have a proposal with all these items on it. The deposit requested is listed. You have the invoices on that project, and if we click on it, you'll see the invoices show up, and it shows the total, how much is paid, how much is due, and then we have the retainer, which is now a little bit depleted because we used it to pay 50% of that invoice. And so we can go back to the items list and we can do the exact same process again. We can say like, okay, all these items are in an invoice, but now let's say some of these items down here are shipped. Let's say these vases have been shipped, so we just want to make an invoice for them. So we'll click on invoice, put in a title, make sure the address is here, fill out the rest of this information, and we want to just hit submit. And here we have the invoice for just this vase. And if we want to create the payment for it, we can hit payment. And again, we want to use that retainer, so we're going to click use retainer, and we're going to choose that retainer. And now we want to enter the amount, so we want to say this is 103 times 50%, 51.84. So we put in, click submit, and now that vase invoice has this payment made on it, and if we refresh the page, we can see that there's an amount due and 50% on it. And when we click the print option and go to print it, you'll see the totals down here show up the same way. And then you can send this invoice to the client to request the final 50%. And so we're going to close that invoice and come back to the overall items page for the project. And if we refresh it, you'll see that now when we scroll down, we have another invoice for just these vases. And we want to, at this point, export this invoice into QuickBooks